I look back on the Thatcher government as one of the pivotal governments of the 20th century. I'm very proud to have been in it, and I think it actually did set Britain on the path of being a modern industrial nation, able to survive and thrive in the modern world. She was very tough. I mean, I enjoyed working for her. Not all her colleagues did, but I thought as long as you could stand the hassle, it was a pleasure working for her. But she was forthright, she was opinionated, she was forceful. She could bully people by accident, not realising she was bullying them. But she knew what she wanted to do, and I felt led by her when I worked for her. She could be desperately rude, and there were people who were, too many of her colleagues were just frightened of her. And others, particularly ones of her generation, people who'd been ministers with her before, I think found it thoroughly miserable and ceased enjoying politics because they were being bullied by Margaret, and they got fed up of the constant, rather strident level which everything was conducted. The reason the British went through a pain barrier with Margaret that no other democratic Western country would or could or has since, was that she did come in on the back of the winter of discontent. She did come in on the back of hatred of overpowerful trade union leaders who brought the country to obvious ruin. The British, having realised they were a ridiculous failure in economic terms, the general climate became extremely difficult, and they stuck to it. And the pain barrier they had to get through in order to begin to create a modern industrial economy that might produce some lasting growth was a much deeper pain barrier than they had expected, and a much deeper pain barrier than almost any other politicians would have gone through. Although they resented at first this tough medicine they were being given, in the end, by 1983, you were rather responding like children who've had Victorian medicine that's worked. They could see it might have been necessary, and it did seem to be making things better now. The Thatcher years were not short of major historical turning points and events. What she did on the economy in 1981 was right, but almost nobody else ever had the nerve to do it. What she did on the Falklands was obviously right, but most of her colleagues, if they'd been in her shoes, would have accepted the military advice and not had the nerve to do it. The miners' strike was definitely right. It was a challenge to democratic government in this country. But after 9 months of the violent strife all over the country, there weren't many people, apart from Margaret Thatcher, who would have done it. And the extraordinary thing about Margaret was not only she had the nerve to carry all those things through, with which her colleagues really agreed, but were rather nervously at times following, I don't think it ever crossed her mind to hesitate in any one of the 3 cases. She excited great hatred amongst her enemies, more than I think any other politician of my time. She's not the only one who aroused great enthusiasm amongst her friends and a devotedly loyal, worshipping following, but I can't think of any other politician of my time who excited so much hatred. The one thing she had in slightly greater quantity than anybody who worked with her was she had willpower, she had courage, she was almost blind to danger, and she did have convictions. And it's in the early years of the 21st century, it's nice to look back to a politician who was governed by conviction at the expense of almost everything else.